Thank you all very much. It's great to be here, an honor to be here, and we'll get our technology fired up here and be ready to go. So I've been interested for a long time in the question of how real is real enough. And this applies in a lot of domains, not just in video and filmmaking. It applies in treating phobias. It applies in helping people, show people how to do tasks. And the answer is different in different contexts. But today I want to focus on the Uncanny Valley and talk about what is the Uncanny Valley. I expect many of you know what the Uncanny Valley is, and talk about some experiments that have been done to help understand the Uncanny Valley. Now, the bad news is that we don't have a really good understanding of the Uncanny Valley, but the good news is the Uncanny Valley is there. There's no question about that. So what is the Uncanny Valley? This was hypothesized by Dr. Mori in the 1970s in Japan with the thought that if we're thinking about the amount of realism that we have in different robots or in different avatars and computer-generated things, as that realism varies as we come across, I had to get used to my technology here. As we go across the realism scale, we go from robots to stuffed animals. At some point, when things get very close to real, if we're looking at, on this axis, how we respond, our affinity, how comfortable we feel with whatever we're seeing, the thought is that as we get to some point where things are almost real but not completely real, our affinity goes way down. And the thought further is that if we're dealing with a moving object, a zombie, the affinity goes down further than if we're just looking at, for instance, a corpse, a dead body. By the way, uncanny is a peculiar term. It has lots of synonyms: eerie, unnatural, unearthly. Stanley Kubrick said, uncanny happens or is when your feelings arise because something's not quite right. Sigmund Freud, as far as we know, was the first person to use uncanny in the context of eeriness or strangeness. Uncanny is everything that arouses dread and creeping horror. That's similar to the feeling of eeriness. There are a lot of things that go into realism, and if we are going to understand what makes an animation real versus not real, then we have to worry a lot about facial expressions, because there are a lot of evidence, a lot of research says that it's the face, especially if we're doing close-ups of the face, that conveys emotions, and where we're very sensitive to irregularities or things that are wrong, flaws in the animation. So a lot of things about the face, micro expressions especially, are things that we can't control but are there. If you've heard that gamblers look at their opponent's face and look for a tell, some little facial gesture that's involuntary that tells whether the gambler has a good hand or a bad hand, whether someone's lying or not lying. This is one of the very small subtleties in facial animation that can have an effect on our perception of reality. Eye gaze and blink is very important, and of course movement of the overall body, if we want to be realistic, needs to be real, and of course rendering of surface properties, given that we have the lighting specified. So there have been a number of animated movies done, some of which are on one side of the Uncanny Valley, others of which are on the other side of the Uncanny Valley.
Why to the North Pole, of course. This is the Polar Express!
The Polar Express was criticized widely by film critics because of the unrealistic appearance of the motion captured characters. The voices were real, the motions were good, but the facial renderings, in particular the facial expressions, just were not at all real.
So you picked a name. I wanted Michael. We're having a girl. That didn't work.
Well, keep Michael in your hip pockets. That way when...
Isabella.
Oh, beautiful. When Isabella shows up with a cute friends, Michael can take his pick.
Hi.
What? That's how I met you. God bless older sisters. That's me. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that as a chance to hit the ladies.
Make it work, please.
How many?
Okay, I'll take that as a chance to hit the ladies.
Here the facial gestures aren't quite right. The hair, while it's styled nicely, doesn't move at all. And some of the motions working out. Good.
I was just thinking, I can't remember the last time the four of us... I've been married to that man for 22 years. And one of the things I've learned that some of the other wives didn't is that it's better to have them happy than to have them safe.
Look at the forehead here, for instance. There's not much happening up in the forehead. And it shows, if you look at it, it's one of the several reasons that these images don't look quite right. They're definitely in the uncanny valley. They're not on a side where they don't appear to be eerie. They definitely appear to be eerie. And then some of the walking motions, when the guy is walking, he kind of is lumbering like this. I watched on the video, on the plane coming over, I watched Big Friendly Giant. There the giant walks a little strangely, but we don't expect the giant to walk like a person because the giant is different than the person. But here we expect a person to look like a person. Now, we can bridge the uncanny valley. We can do really, really good work. Look at all the skin pores, the detail, the eyelashes, all the wrinkles. Oh, but it's not real. It was actually a digital scan done by Paul Dubevik at University of Southern California. There's a wonderful recreation of the face, a playback of what Ira was doing in real life. But if we wanted to have Ira doing something else, can't do it. Now here's a really, really impressive feature movie. Benjamin Button, or that rendering, is so real. It's definitely on the good side of the uncanny valley. There's nothing eerie about it until the polygonal mesh comes on the face, when of course we all of a sudden realize it's not at all real. With either of those examples, the Benjamin Button was done with motion capture. The digital Iro is done with a lot of cameras capturing the face. All we can do is playback. We can't take that character and have it say other things or create other expressions other than what was digitally recorded. So while yes, we can bridge the uncanny valley with a lot of work, we can't do it in completely general ways. Well, those videos kind of suggest that yes, there really is an uncanny valley, particularly the second one with at the dining room table. But we can kind of intuit by looking at these things that yes, the uncanny valley does exist, but do we have any experimental evidence from a controlled psychological study that it might exist? And if so, what are the things about the uncanny valley that make it uncanny? If we had to, for instance, have a rendering budget, if we're doing real-time animation and a game playback, we can't afford to do everything that might make something real, so where should we put our efforts? So let's first think about, does the uncanny valley exist? So intuitively, yes, it exists. Take a look at two experiments that address the question. Here's an experiment in which 10 different renderings of the same person in varying degrees of realism, varying from a pencil cartoon through these various renderings up to an actual picture, shown to a lot of subjects in a controlled experimental environment. And they're asked to, firstly, they're asked to just rank these on realism. Because if we want to make an uncanny valley-like plot, we have to know in what order are these most realistic. And it turns out that these are almost in the order that subjects said they should be in to be realistic, but not quite. When we go to the ranking, there was a switch between these two, between shaded and base. So shaded is a little more realistic to a lot of people looking at this than is the toon bear. So here's the realism ranking based on a scale from extremely abstract to extremely realistic, probably a 7-point scale. And it's monotonic increasing. That was the goal of doing this initial ranking. But then we asked, what about appeal? How appealing are these different images to us? And now we get a valley. Look at this. We have a valley. Well, my laser light is not wanting to go on. Oh, there it is. There. Here's the valley. It's the biggest valley was on human number 3, which was, it's not quite real. It's not perfect as a picture, and it's also not a cartoon. So it was very much a valley here. What I have here in black is the shape of the hypothesized uncanny valley, and you see that the curve, the data curve, doesn't quite match. In particular, when we get over here on the other side of the uncanny valley, things don't get more familiar. That's probably because what was the question here was, how does this appeal to you? Not, is it eerie? How does it feel? And it's certainly not the same as eeriness, but the point is there is a valley. If we ask about friendliness, there's another valley, but notice that the cartoonish faces, which are the faces way over here, they're also, they're more friendly than the real person. So we have cartoons being more friendly than the real person. I attribute this not to evidence that's saying the uncanny valley is not there. The dip is really saying there is something, but it's just the experimental design was not really asking quite the right questions. Another experiment, take morphing, the morphing program, and just go from a robot through an android to a real person. So we have this sequence of 11 images and ask, again, a lot of subjects, a lot of people, how do these look in terms of mechanical versus human-like, strange versus familiar, and eeriness? Now we're asking the right question. We're really asking directly about eeriness. And here are results. And again, up here are the pictures. There are 3 different curves. The one to focus on here is this least eerie, or sorry, the most eerie. It has a peak right in the middle here where we're kind of halfway between a robot and a real person. What is that? Well, it's some kind of a artificial person, but it's not a real person. It doesn't look real. And least familiar, it's interesting that a robot was considered to be more familiar with a 3.8, more familiar than these. And of course, a real human up here was, the picture of the human was certainly judged to be very familiar. So what causes uncanniness? What is it that we pick up on, like in the early videos? There are a number of theories. The theory that makes the most sense to me is this idea of what's called cognitive dissonance or category conflict, in which there are different clues in the visual representation that don't quite jive. We might have, for instance, perfect skin detail, but no skin movement. we might be capturing all the pores, but not have any wrinkles when someone speaks. Or you might have the eyes are rendered very perfectly, but the eyes are always looking straight ahead. They don't move up and down and back and forth, and so forth. So that seems to be, to me, and there are a number of experiments that verify that. Here's one experiment in which a lot of subjects, like 200, ranked videos of a real person and two CG images. One CG image here has full facial animation. And you see up here there's some wrinkling around the nose, and there's a little bit of wrinkling on the forehead, whereas here there's no motion on the eyelids, the eyebrows don't move. I'm going to show you videos of just the two CG characters so you can see.
The cat sat on the mat. The cat sat on the mat. The cat sat on the mat. The cat sat on the mat.
So here the full virtual reality, and this was actually done with a male and with a female, and I've only shown you the videos of the males. The full reality was judged uncanniness not as uncanny as the half. See, the half facial animation in which the top of the face wasn't animated was judged a little bit more uncanny than the face in which we had full animation. The human was judged less uncanny, less eerie. Good, let's hear it for humankind. Another piece of evidence for the mismatch theory from another experiment with the citations for all of these are down in the corner here. Here, this was done just with static images. And we take Photoshop and take pictures of someone and to get them to pose an expression of fear in their eyes, and a separate picture, a happy smile. Then we Photoshop them together, so we get this synthesized face in which the eyes are happy, the eyes are fearful, the face is happy. Over here, the eyes are fearful, the rest of the face is kind of neutral. Over here, we have both fear in the eyes and fear in the mouth. And we ask a lot of people, again, lots of subjects, we show them not just the three examples here, but we show them a lot of other examples. I know you can't see them all, just the point is there are lots of examples of these mismatches between the expression on the top of the face and the expression on the bottom of the face. And by Jove, the expressions that were mismatched most were the expressions that were judged to be most eerie. So a couple pieces of evidence for the mismatch theory. What if we want to know what different aspects that we might animate are most important in creating reality or eeriness? Here's a very nicely done experiment. In my mind, it's the best done of all the experiments I'll be talking about. It was done by Jessica Hodgins and others at CMU and Disney Studios Disney Lab in Pittsburgh. They did video clips, and I'll show you the video clips in a moment. These are just some stills from them with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different animation conditions, ranging from having full animation on the full animation. Here we're animating the face, but no eye movement, so the eyes are just fixed ahead. Here we're doing kind of a cross-eyed, where the eyes are looking together, sometimes called lazy eyes. Low face, in which the lower part of the mouth is animated, but the upper part is not animated. Half face, in which one side of the face is animated, the other side of the face is not, as though someone had a stroke and is partially paralyzed on one side of the face. No movement in one arm or a tremor in one arm. So let's take a look at the video clips that were used in the experiment.
I don't have to ask you.
Maybe we
You
cannot
are not
afford.
my father.
I just came from the mailbox.
Yes.
And I got the credit card bill.
So,
$700. What do you
And
mean?
I
I
find
didn't
that
do it
there's something
yesterday.
nice
What do you
cereal.
want from
It
me?
happens every week. I want you to go to the store.
It just came from the mailbox.
Yes.
And I got the credit card bill.
So,
$700.
so what? You did it yesterday and left
So?
it in there for the whole day. So what? You did it yesterday and left
So?
it in there for the whole day. I don't have to ask
not-
you.
Maybe we
You
cannot
are not
afford.
my father.
What do you
And
mean?
I
I
find
didn't
that
do it
there's something
yesterday.
nice
What do you
cereal.
want from me?
It happens every week. I want you to go to the store. Again, I open the refrigerator and I find an empty milk carton.
So those are the video clips, and again, this was done with a lot of subjects, relative rankings pair by pair between each pair of these visualizations. What were the results? One result was that not having eye movements in this particular case did not make any difference, which is surprising because we know that eye movements are important as we connect with someone and feel like they're alive and real. My hypothesis about why it didn't make an effect here is because we did not have a tight shot of the face. It was a wide shot in the whole kitchen, and there was a lot of activity. The woman was moving around, moving the hands and so forth. We weren't really drawn toward the eyes to focus on them. So I'm not prepared to believe this is a general result. Another result, the facial animations were considered more important for reality, for realism, than the body movements. So if that arm didn't move, didn't matter. If the arm jerked a little bit, didn't matter. On the bottom side, on the eeriness side, the animations that suggested some sort of a disease, like the half face, which would be a stroke, or the lazy eyes, which would be a muscular problem with the eyes, or the no arm movement, which could also be a symptom of a stroke and being paralyzed. Those were the least preferred. And there is one theory about the Uncanny Valley that says we've learned over time to be sensitive to abnormalities that could be disease-caused and that we might catch. And so we're kind of scared away by folks who might have some disease. I don't personally find that as very credible. But I would love to see this experiment redone with very, very realistic images, very realistic renderings, as opposed to these very cartoonish. Just in terms of the realism of the actual rendering, it's way down on the not very real side, so it would definitely be worth repeating. So what this particular experiment told us is some things we're more sensitive to than other things. Talk briefly about a couple of other experiments that show us what things we are more sensitive to, what things we are not sensitive to, which can help us understand how to avoid the Uncanny Valley. What they don't tell us is how far we have to be to avoid it. It just tells us what we're more sensitive to. So here's an animation of two people running. One of them is a completely synthesized runner with a finite state machine controller going through the different steps of running. The other is mocap of a real runner and then just digitizing certain points, the shoulders and so forth. Whereas the mocap is just taking those shoulder points and hips and so forth. Which one is real, which is not? It's really hard to tell. If you look at them for a while, you'll probably conclude that the one here is a real one. There's just a little bit of randomness in it, and that's one of the differences between a completely synthesized runner that's driven by a finite state machine or controller with torques on the joints and so forth, and a real runner that's randomness. Are we sensitive to other kinds of body movements? Here's an interesting experiment in which we do mocap on children doing certain actions and on adults doing the same actions. And then we show the mocap just as dot figures again to a lot of people and ask, was this motion done by a child or done by an adult? And in the experiment, well, if the answer is yes, if we can tell the difference between children and adult movements, which turns out we can, that says we're sensitive to notion subtleties. It says we should not use mocap of adults to animate children, and we shouldn't use children mocap to animate adults. in both cases, we're getting mismatched cues. We'll be getting the motion of a child superimposed on an adult or the other way around. So these are the two examples of the mocap doing jumping jacks, kind of jumping up and down. I want you all to decide for yourselves which is the child and which one is the adult, and then I'm going to tell you. Because it's dark in here, I won't take a show of hands to see how many of you had it right. Okay, have you made up your mind? There we go. Yeah, the child is flapping a little more. It's a little more irregular. What about eye blinking? We know that, especially on tight shots, if we just have the head, everything about the face is going to be important. How sensitive are we to how we animate an eye closing and then opening? Here's a nice experiment in which the experimenters did high-speed photography of real people blinking and then digitized that to get the trajectories. This is the actual trajectory of a real person closing their eye and then opening with the displacement and time. Time runs this way, and vertically is the displacement of closing the eye and then opening it up. This is what we might do in a simple animation, in which we just do a linear interpolation, the eye shuts, and then another linear interpolation and open up the eye. Well, here's slow motion feedback of animations. These are not the high-speed photography. This is real animations of eyes opening and closing. And up here is the one that's how we really do our eyes, and here's the linear interpolation. And here the experiment was actually done with 5 different trajectories. And here's the realism ranking, ranging from, this is on a scale of 1 to 7, and the realism ranged from 4 for the linear interpolation, 4.07 up to 4.87. Not a huge difference, but it's when we look at these two, we can certainly see the difference. How about smiles? Can we tell when someone's making a real smile or a fake smile? Well, let's look at someone making a real smile and someone making a forced artificial smile. Please smile for me. Yeah. This was done, again, experimentally with 3 conditions: a video playback of a real person smiling, and then video capture using the actual trajectories of the smile, and then also with linear interpolation, so doing it the easy way as opposed to the hard way. These are just shots. I'll show you a video in a moment, but these are shots from a sequence: a natural smile, forced smile. You can see a little bit of difference between these two. You can certainly see some difference here. A little bit of difference in the starting. These are the trajectories in terms of the movement of the corners of the mouth versus time in each case. And here are some videos. Focus on these two. Those are the natural path and the linear path. Well, so if we did an experiment with a lot of people, say, which is the forced smile, which is the natural smile, do you think you'd be able to tell? Yes, on average, you would be able to tell. Here are the results. This genuineness ranked from 0 up to 100. The 3 conditions. One's the video, the complete reality, the natural velocity and path of the smile, and then just doing linear interpolation. So if we're just doing the digitized, well, let's look at this. So here's the natural smile. We do better. The more real we are, the better we do it, telling us the natural smile. It's interesting that with the forced smile, we do better with the natural path and velocity. We actually do less well with the video. I don't have a good explanation for why that is the case, but there it is. So we're sensitive to a lot of things about the face. But again, what this doesn't tell us is how far we have to be toward real. Do we really need to do the nonlinear interpolation on the eye blinking or on the smile? to be convincing. This is not testing eeriness, it's not testing where are we in the uncanny valley, but it's a start at helping us understand the uncanny valley. I mentioned earlier the idea that the uncanny valley most likely is due to mismatched cues. And animators know this. It's not a surprise. Here's a clip from oops, why is this not playing? Okay, play.
I just picked a couple shots of things above water and things below water, real footage, and I said, okay, using exactly the tools that we have created, nothing else, I want you to see how close you can mimic these actual shots. And they came back a couple weeks later, and they put the two images up, the actual live action footage and then our footage, and I couldn't tell which one was which. We were shocked. I mean, we were elated because it's like, oh my gosh, we did it. I mean, it looks like water. Then we had to sort of pull back and go, wait a minute, it looks too real. We want you to believe that it exists, but we want you to also kind of feel that you're in a make-believe world.
So the message here is, and this wasn't about the uncanny valley with human, but it was with Finding Nemo, which in general is not creating a realistic view, except in one thing. It turns out the fish animations are actually very, very real, and there's another clip which shows the Finding Nemo animators having fish swimming in a tank, and next to it is an animated fish, and it's a wonderful match. They did a great job of matching up the movement, but they intentionally did not try to make the fish look real. You know, the fish in Finding Nemo looked like cartoon fish. Another notion of mixed signals, this is from Ramon Huey, who animated Shrek. When they started out with Fiona, some of the sketches or the initial renderings were too real. We wanted to make Fiona less human-like to blend into the rest of the cast, to avoid the mixed messages. We ended up making Fiona's eyes a bit bigger than a real person, and also her skin a bit smoother too. So this was an intentional effort to move to the left of the uncanny valley so that Fiona, when compared with the other characters in the movie, would not be sending mixed messages. Well, what does all this mean? Well, firstly, experiments take a lot of work, and all the experiments are described to you were a lot of work. They get us some ideas, but they don't go all the way. We certainly don't have a complete understanding of all the elements of the uncanny valley, and we don't really have a good understanding of how real you have to be, how close to 100% reality you have to be in order to come up out of the uncanny valley, or how far away from reality you need to be to just get up on the other side of that valley. We certainly know, both from the video clips and experiments, there is some kind of an uncanny valley out there. Mixed cues get us into the valley, and we are very, very sensitive to subtleties in facial expressions. So that's what we know, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you very much.